Music to the noise, yeah, the mess we make. Machine Blunt Kelly get caught in the fray. Facts and logic with a twist of chest. Strip it down to truth, yeah, forget the rest. Humor pulls the lights right out of the park. Look beyond the shadows that set the dark. Sparks of laughter fire up the night, bringing clarity when they blur the fight. Cut through the chaos, yeah, the tangled lies. Steampunk Kelly with a set of clear eyes. Truths and jokes gonna rock this show. Step into light where the real facts glow.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Punch Show. Thank you for joining me. You will notice, I think, you might be able to notice, I'm wearing a Chicago Bulls hoodie. I do not have a MS-13 hoodie or a Chicago Bulls hat, but I figure, if I combine the two into a Chicago Bulls hoodie, that's close enough to make me MS-13 these days. So hopefully I won't get deported before the show is over. But a lot of people are talking about it, and a lot of people should be talking about it, and a lot more people should be angry about what's happening with the whole situation, not just with Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And I'm sorry if I'm going to try and pronounce some Spanish words today, but I don't speak Spanish. So if I say it in my weird accent, then I apologize for that. But there are more important things. We had, as I was, preparing for this show, one thing that kind of jumped out at me was JD Vance was tweeting about, there's 20 million illegals in this country, and what are we supposed to give all of them due process? And the answer to that is yes. I mean, there's not 20 million, but that's irrelevant. If there were 20 million, then yes, every single person gets due process. And as we get into the details of this, you will see why everyone needs due process. And some people have tried to make it out like, they have tried to make Abrego Garcia like an assumed guilt as a justification. And we'll get into the details. But there is no justification ever. I don't care. If somebody is guilty, it's not saying due process does not mean they go free. Due process means they end up in prison. And here's the thing. Here's one thing that I wish more media would point out. Abrego Garcia had due process. He went to a court and he proved that he was not guilty of what they were saying. So it's not like they just didn't give him due process. He had a court hearing, and then 6 years later, they renditioned him anyway. And so that's another thing I want to get into. They keep talking about how he was deported or removed. No, he was renditioned, and that's a different word with a different meaning, and it means a lot. So let's start from like the beginning. Let's start from the top, and then we'll work our way down to Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Okay. The whole flawed premise of why he was able to be renditioned, and all of these 300 were able to be renditioned, is based on a couple of things that are, I would say legally questionable, but they are just brazenly abuse of power. One is there's something called the Foreign Enemies Act, which was passed like in 1798 or something. And there was like a little war with France going on. And so it was used to like detain French people that they thought might be, part of the war or whatever. Then it was used in I think it might have been like, I've heard 1812, but anyway, I think maybe it was 1812. And then there was World War I and then World War II. And World War II is most, we used it to detain Germans in World War I, and then the Japanese in World War II. And that's, like the worst part of it, when there was like 100,000. Then there's also something called the War Powers Act, which was under Nixon, which allows the president to declare war and then have like Congress has like 90 days to validate that. And we don't have wars with gangs, right? Like they keep wanting to make it seem like immigrants, whether they're legal or not, are invading the country. Like there's some sort of hostile invasion from another nation, And Donald Trump is always saying things like, they're sending us their criminals. Like there is some sort of master plan by all the third world nations to send all its most evil people here to insidiously destroy the United States and poison our blood. And, this is really just an act of self-defense. And so these organizations that are doing it are clearly terrorists that are invading our country. And so we need to fight back. And I mean, none of that is true. It's complete hogwash. And if you don't spend if you don't have a steady diet of Fox News and drivel, then you know that. But unfortunately, a good percentage of America now is like mainlighting MAGA disinformation. And so that's why we need to really talk about this. And I don't just mean talk about it on my podcast. I mean, you need to talk about it on your Facebook page if you still have one. This is not the time to retreat into a bubble. This is the time to pop their bubble. Because this is so serious. This is so egregious. This is not in 4 years later, 4 years, it'll get better. Because there might not be an election in 4 years if we keep at this rate. So there's this they create this notion that these people are terrorists that are coming over and they're invading our country, and they're using that as a premise now to rendition them. Stop saying deported. They're not deporting anybody. I've seen people say things like human trafficking or kidnapping. But even those things are not the same thing as what is happening. Renditioning means that you take an enemy combatant and place them in a prison in another country so that you can torture them and, leave them to die. There's no due process. There's nothing. It's just, yep, we're going to just black site you and drop you in this prison. And there's nothing at all that anyone can do about it. And that's what they're doing. And they do that with the justification that these are foreign invading terrorists or whatever. And so now you have like 300 people. It's not just Abrego Garcia that is there. It is all 300 of them. And, there's some reports, there might be some evidence that like maybe a dozen of them are actually, gang related. But I would say there's no difference between the ones that are gang related and the ones that are not gang related. Because until you prove in a court that somebody is committing a crime, you can't just say they committed a crime and send them to die in a foreign prison. Like, I don't even understand why we are having that as a conversation. What is wrong with people that they're just like, well, he should have done that before he raped children. And it's like, what children did he rape? I am all for, imprisoning people that rape children. I am not for imprisoning people that are accused of raping prison without the government having to prove it. That's the thing. That's what due process is. It's two words, due process. It means the process which you are due. And so you've got J.D. Vance, the vice president of the United States, arguing that people in the United States are not entitled to due process, even though the Constitution and the Supreme Court have both said that if you're a person in the United States, you get due process. That is our law. That is our history. That is our Constitution. And the vice president of the United States is setting aside the Constitution just to justify his hatred and racism. I don't accept that. I don't accept that. I can't accept that. And you shouldn't either. Like, nobody. I'm sorry. I'm yelling with you, not at you guys. I'm just like, this makes me so angry. I cannot believe the rhetoric coming out of the Trump administration right now. And I promised my wife I would try not to swear today. So I'm going to really try, but it's going to be really hard at times. So you got J.D. Vance sitting there saying that, due process doesn't apply if you're not legal. But you know, as we go into it, you will find out why due process has to apply if you're illegal, if you are here legally or illegally, because people that were here legally aren't being renditioned. And that's part of due process. Like, if they can get rid of, if they can just disregard, ignore a no removal order, what makes you think they can't do the same thing to a birth certificate? You think you're being a citizen protects you? If they can throw away one piece of paper, they can throw away another piece of paper. And then you've got, what's his name? Nazi guy, I can't think of his name right now, on TV last night talking about people that even argue in favor of Garcia's or of Abrego's Garcia's due process. Even if you're just arguing in favor of that, that can make you a terrorist sympathizer. Like, I could, according to him, I could be prosecuted for broadcasting this podcast right now. And if you don't have a problem with that, don't tell me you love America. All right. So that's the big picture. And you've got 300 people right now being held in a foreign prison without having any trial at all, without having any criminal charges even filed against them. They just got put on an airplane and then dumped into a prison where they are being, like, there's human rights violations going on down there, and they're being used as a photo op by a dog murderer. So now let's talk about Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He was born in 1995 in El Salvador, and he had a family. And his mom made something, this kind of, I had it written down and now I can't find where I wrote it down. It's like a El Salvador flatbread, like or a Salvadoran tortilla. And puntos or something. I can't, anybody knows it, they can go ahead and drop it in the comments. But anyway, she made them really good, I guess. And he and his older brother would go to the store and get the ingredients, and she sold them. And apparently this community, she was like the best bread maker. And so everybody went there. And when you have these little shops, these little home shops, the gangs, they want their cut. Like, you're not like, you've got to pay the gangs a tax. And so this gang that was running that area went to her and said, yeah, you've got to pay your tax if you're going to be selling this. And so then, like, she was paying them. And then they, started saying, well, if, you don't pay more, then we're going to kill your son, your older son. Caesar was his name. And so that went back and forth. And then after a couple of years of that, they sent Caesar to go run off to the United States And so he was living in Maryland, and then the same thing happened with Diego, and there were they tried moving homes 3 different times. The gang kept finding them and threatening them. The dad was a former police officer, and he couldn't do anything. The whole police department was corrupt, and so eventually Kilmar had to flee. They had him come to the United States to join his brother, and he was 16 years old when he crossed the border illegally. Not going to say he did not cross the border illegally, but that's pretty much irrelevant. He crossed the border illegally, and he lived here for a few years, found a girlfriend, and then he one day he was at Home Depot, and he was looking for day work. And you know how it's a pretty common trope, even just the undocumented workers looking for day work at Home Depot. And so there were a handful of them sitting around and trying to find some work. And there was something else going. There was some kind of murder investigation going on, and then they got this tip that these guys might be MS-13 that were hanging out at the Home Depot, and so they came and they arrested these guys. And there's not even any indication that these 4 people knew each other. I don't think that like all the undocumented workers have like a little club and a secret handshake or anything. Like it could have just been 4 random guys that were hanging out at Home Depot. And but somebody thought that they were MS-13 and blah 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 and so on and so forth. The next thing he knows, he's in jail, and there's a cop that fills out this form, and you'll see that like this form is used as part of the justification for illegally renditioning him. And what they said is he was he had MS-13 connections, and there was this informant that had told this cop, and the cop was telling this judge, right? So it's what they call double hearsay. It's not even I heard this thing. It's somebody told me this, and this was all in an immigration court, and it was all to see if Abrego could stay or whether he would be removed. And this was a bond hearing. Yeah. The Holocaust 2. It really is. It's that dangerous. So sorry, I lost my train of thought. So so back to the cop, the jail. So these Home Depot guys that are just looking for day work are all in jail now, and they 3 of them apparently were let go. We don't know whatever happened to the other 3. The alleged murder case, there's no murder investigation that Prince George County can show, and we don't know who the informant was, and the cop that made the assurances was later either I get conflicting. There's conflicting reports. Some people say he was suspended, and others say he was fired. But anyway, not the most credible of sources that he was an MS-13. And then, this goes back to why I'm wearing my hoodie. He was wearing a Chicago Bulls hat and some kind of hoodie that had, like money over president's eyes or something. I don't even know what that's all about. But, allegedly this was all gang attire. And so that just proved he was part of MS-13. And I don't know what MS-13 wears, but apparently Jesse Waters does. But this is important because when you start breaking it down, the entire case against Kilmar Abrego Garcia comes down to the fact that he was wearing a hoodie and a hat. That's all it is. That is the actual facts involved are that, and the double hearsay testimony of a cop that got fired for being dishonest. Right. So there's reason to doubt that, right? And so so the immigration judge, there was two immigration judges. The first one said he had to be held because of this cop's testimony that he was MS-13. So the guy said, well, this must, he's a danger. So we have to hold him until his immigration hearing. Then a second immigration judge that actually judged his immigration hearing found him to be a credible threat. And the results of that are kind of down the middle. Like he wanted asylum, but what happens if you come over here illegally, you have 1 year to request asylum. And he didn't do that within the year. And so he was denied asylum, but he was given a stop removal order, which means he can't be sent back to El Salvador. Then later on, he was granted legal status to stay here, and he was even granted a work permit. And this all happened under Trump 1, by the way, in 2019 when Donald Trump was president. This is when that happened. So he got legal status to work here under the Trump administration. So they want to make it sound like it's somehow Biden's fault or something. And there is no fault. So the immigration judge said he could stay here and he could work here. And then he had to report once a year to immigration just to, confirm things. I don't know what all that is. But he made his annual reports. He started going to community college and trade school. He joined a union. He didn't have to be a day worker anymore, which maybe felt pretty good for him. So anyway, he's trying to build a life for himself. He's got his kid, and his girlfriend had 2 other kids. All 3 of them have disabilities. And so, they're just this young family trying to get through life. There is, in 2021, there's an incident where he, there's some domestic and violence involved. And I'm not saying he's perfect, but I'm not saying everybody that's ever been accused of domestic violence needs to be renditioned to a prison in El Salvador either. Like this is one thing they do whenever it comes to a person of color being treated unfairly, like whether it's Mike Brown or I can't, the guy that put it. If a black person gets killed by a cop, they go through their entire legal history to kind of reassess it to make it sound like the cop somehow knew all of this when he decided to kill the guy that was unarmed. Like this is the same type of thing they do. This kind of post hoc. Oh, we went and we found this, and so that proves it's okay. Well, but it doesn't prove it's okay. You didn't even know that when you deported him. And even if it were, like, you can't deport him for that. And anyway, it's just nonsense. It's just let's smear the victim here. And if we can make the victim look like the terrible person, then that justifies whatever we do to him. And that's why I am saying it is so important that we protect due process, because you do not want the only thing protecting you from being renditioned is the government saying something after the fact. I mean, like, this is just humanly wrong. And I don't like it kind of like really offends me on just a gut level that people are defending this. I do not see how anyone can defend one aspect of this. And I can't, it's horrendous to me that our president, our vice president, the attorney general, who makes me want to use a word that rhymes with punt that I never use. Like, all of them, the ones who are supposed to be protecting us, supposed to be safeguarding our laws, are the ones most egregiously violating them and most egregiously violating us. If you put them in, if you rendition them, you might as well rendition me, because I don't know. Again, if a no stat removal order is a piece of paper, and if they can disregard that piece of paper, they can disregard my birth certificate if I find it. And now you've got them, you know, every person, every foreign national in the country has to go and fill out a form now and register. Yeah, that sounds really, really good. Yes, I don't see concentration camps coming out of that. Do you? We've just, you know, set aside that they have due process and any kind of legal rights or anything like that. Okay, so going back to Abrego Garcia, he has this, you know, event with his wife, and she files the restraining order. He complies with this restraining order. He goes back, goes to marriage counseling, improves himself as a person. The wife says everything is better. The wife did not end up following through and pressing charges against him. They keep saying Kilmar Abrego Garcia has never been convicted of a crime. He has never been tried for a crime. He has never been arrested for a felony. Like, there's not even not in El Salvador, not here. He's never even been accused of an actual violent crime of any sort. The worst thing is, like, I think there's some reports that he got pulled over driving without a license, you know. So I guess, you know, are we going to start renditioning people for driving without a license now? Or is it just if they wear a bull's hat? Like, we have to draw the line, and the line is you have to prove in a criminal court what you are saying before you can put people in prison. That's the line. That's the line we've had the entire history of our country. That's the line we need to hold right now. And I don't care. I do not care one little bit where you were born. That line still applies. Because if that line doesn't apply to them, it doesn't apply to me. And you know what? Even if it didn't apply to me, it should apply to them. It's like, I just don't think that the government should be locking up people in foreign prisons on their say-so. And that's all we have. And they are going back to an immigration court where an immigration judge already heard that evidence, and that immigration judge said, no, he gets to stay. There is a credible threat. And this is, like, again, this is just, it started off as a 16-year-old kid not wanting to be murdered. Like, that's his great crime. He didn't want to be murdered. I get so tired of people. Why do they cross here illegally? You know, it's just so they can get free cell phones or whatever. Like, nobody walks across half a continent so they can get a free cell phone. You do that because you're afraid for your life. And so then what they do is they send him back, not just back, they rendition him to a prison where the gang people that want to kill him are. So there are a lot of people that are wondering whether he is really still alive, and I am one of them. There's a reason that judge believed he had a credible threat of being sent back. And I don't think they're taking their time trying to take care of that threat. And I wonder how many of the other 300 are still alive. I hope he comes back. I hope he's able to come back and like see his children again and see his wife again. But I am not confident that that's even a possibility anymore. And so then you've got, so what happens is after the restraining order thing, a couple of years go by, or, I guess 4 years go by. And then this spring, he's just driving his car, making a better life for himself. And the cops pull him over, or the ICE pulls him over and says, oh, we've got a new court order that says that, you can be removed. And they pull him out, they take him away, they call his wife and say, oh, you need to come get your kid, or we're going to send your kid, because his kid was in the back seat. And if you don't come get him, we're going to send him to child welfare. So she comes, gets him, never sees her husband again, possibly. That, and imagine being that kid, and all of a sudden your dad is just dragged away by the American Gestapo. And that's an American citizen. That kid is an American citizen. So they ship him off to this prison by an administrative error. And I just would love to know, how do you make that mistake? Like, they just dismiss it. Oops. Sorry, I sent you off to a foreign prison to die, Kilmar. If it was a mistake, why aren't you rectifying it? Why aren't you doing anything to rectify it? There is a Supreme Court that heard all of this evidence and said, bring him back. You have to. They told Donald Trump, you have to try and bring him back. You have to facilitate bringing him back. So there's a senator, I can't think of the name right now, that went down there. And yesterday he was on Rachel Maddow, and he says he talked to the vice president over there, and that's where he learned they're paying $6 million to keep these people detained. Oh, and also there's, I think there were 3 flights in all. Yes, thank you, personal Planchet. It's Chris Van Hollen. And I'm so glad he did that. It's good to see Democrats fighting tyranny instead of fighting each other. So he's down there and he asks the vice president. Vice president says, oh, yeah, they're paying us. And it's like, okay, one way you could facilitate this is stop the fucking paychecks. Sorry, Mom. Or sorry, Mary. Stop the paychecks. Stop sending them paychecks. Like, don't pay them until they send him back. The other aspect of this is, okay, you're saying that there's no legal recourse, right? He's an El Salvadoran citizen. Do what you have to do. Have you ever heard of extradition? You can extradite him if there are crimes that he has committed that you have evidence of. Then bring him back here, have him face trial, and there you go. Bob's your uncle. But they're not doing that because they don't have any crimes he can be credibly tried with. They can't send a thing and saying, yes, this crime, if it were like the fake murder thing, they could extradite him for that. They say, oh, he was human trafficking. Okay. Try him for it. You're just going to, you can't just say somebody was a human trafficker and then send them to be renditioned in a foreign prison. Like, that's not how things work. And some people are like, well, he's not in a foreign prison. Yes, he is. He was legally living here and working here. And you sent him to a prison in another country. So if I'm in America and you're in El Salvador, you are in a foreign country. And so am I. My country is foreign to you. Your country is foreign to me. But he was here. His family is here. He was legally here. He wasn't, you know, and it's like, it doesn't become okay to rendition somebody to a foreign country illegally just because they were born there. This is what I'm talking about with the rule of law, and why the rule of law is so fundamentally crucial to all of this conversation. And, you know, to your MAGA families and your MAGA friends, if you have any left, not everybody does. This is like about them. What if, you know, let's say in 2028, Pete Buttigieg wins, you know, and I'm not saying this is even remotely realistic, but let's say he says, yeah, MAGA is a terrorist organization. There's more basis for saying that than for saying MS-13 is, right? MS-13 is definitely a violent organization, a criminal organization. Not denying that. They're horrible. It's also an American export, but, you know, that's not really important. MAGA actually tried to overthrow the country, like violently. So what if Pete Buttigieg said, yeah, MAGA is a terrorist organization. And then he started just renditioning people to El Salvador. Would you be okay with that? Because I don't think you would be. And we've always got to keep this in mind, no matter who is president, no matter whether it's your guy or the other guy, is, do you want the other guy to have the same power that you're arguing for this guy? You know, and sometimes it's difficult. Like with the terrorist, the American terrorist that Obama hit with the drone strikes. You know, that's tough. You know, what would you do? You're president of the United States. There is this guy that used to be an American citizen. He has renounced that he's an American citizen. He's living in a foreign country, and where you can't extradite him. There's no treaty or anything. He's actually, you have active information that he is actively planning a terrorist attack on your country, and you can wipe him out with a drone. You know where he is? The information you have says that he's, you know, there aren't any civilians, so you go ahead and do you give the order or not? It's a hard decision. And that's why I think sometimes we need to be really careful who we give that decision-making power to. I trust Obama will do the right thing in that situation. I do not trust Donald Trump will do the right thing in that situation. But I've seen people use this as a false equivalent with what Trump is doing right now. You know, what happened to his due process? Well, it's an entirely different situation. And you know, there's the risk in there. There's the ability to, you know, bring him in and try him, right? If what you're saying about Abrego Garcia is true, you had him here in America. You could have just taken him to a criminal court and tried him, right? So it's just, this is the kind of entirely false narratives that they want to, you know, combat with. Okay, so, you know, they ship Abrego Garcia off to this prison, and then the court says they have to bring him back, and they are like, you know, oh, he's not doing it, and so then the government says, you know, well, they're paying us, and then Van Hollen talked to the embassy and said, has anybody reached out to you to try to do anything? And they're like, no. So the Supreme Court said, facilitate it. And the Trump administration has not done a thing to facilitate it. instead, you've got the stupidest attorney general in the history of attorney generals insisting that's never going to happen. He's never coming back. And she's just saying unequivocally, he is a terrorist. He is a child trafficker. He is a murderer. All of these things, there's no evidence at all for. Again, you go back and you look at the actual evidence that they actually have against him. It's the word of a disgraced cop making a secondhand heresy again, or hearsay, a secondhand hearsay from informant we don't know because he was wearing a hat and a sweatshirt. That is the evidence. And it didn't uphold in an immigration court, so it's sure not going to uphold in a criminal court. And then they've used the post hoc justification of the restraining order that his wife put on him and took off. So the wife forgave him for that. The wife is okay with him. And you're going to just ignore all that? Like, we have a legal process pretty much everywhere in the world. We are like going into dystopian Nazism here. And, you know, people get upset if you point out that they're Nazis nowadays. But the red Nazi hats are everywhere. And you cannot tell me that you're not a Nazi when you vote for a guy that says that immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country. He like literally quoted Hitler or paraphrased Hitler. He used Hitler's argument, right? Then he starts deporting people that are ruining the blood of the country he's renditioning them to a foreign prison to die. Like, how is that not a concentration camp? With no trial or anything. You know, they had made up reasons for locking up the Jews too. And a lot of people were okay with it. A lot of people sat by. And I remember, like, there's times when I was growing up, I was like, how could people let this happen? How can you let this happen? I remember, man, and it wasn't just Nazi Germany. I remember USSR. This was Cold War time. I grew up. I graduated from high school in 1985. So, I mean, like, I was right down the middle heart of the Cold War, my teen years. In 1990 or 1989, I was stationed in Italy, but I was TDY to Germany. And I was in Germany when the wall came down. And I sat there bawling my eyes out as these people tore down the wall and celebrated their freedom. One of the most memorable events of my life. And now I am watching people want to build one. Reagan said, tear down this wall, and they tore it down. And now the Republicans want to build one back up over here. That is an atrocity to me that I cannot forgive. This is beyond reason. The Vice President of the United States saying that due process is an unnecessary burden on the government. It's terrifying, and it's soul crushing. And there are so many people I know that are very upset about it, and they should be, and you should be, and you should be doing something. And if you're not upset about it, if you're okay with it, then just think, what if it was your child? What if it was your dad? You know, we talk a lot about leopards eating faces around here. You know, I even wrote a song about it. And, you know, it's kind of a fun and jovial song to make light of such a serious situation. Because sometimes the only way I can handle the worst things is, you know, I find humor. But there's no humor. There's no jokes in any of this. There's nothing light or funny about any of it. This man was murdered, possibly, by the United States government because he had a hat and a hoodie. And that is not grounds for sending somebody to die in a foreign prison. And whether he's dead yet or not, when is he getting out? Like, none of these people have a sentence. None of these people have an out date. We're just going to spend $6 million a year to keep them there. Until what? Until they're all dead? How many more are we going to send there? Like, this is a starting point. This is what Trump does and what the MAGAs does and what Stephen Miller does. It's the, you know, I say on this program a lot that Donald Trump is the Overton window. And what I mean by that is if you don't know what the Overton window is, the Overton window is kind of a perceived frame of, like a window frame of acceptable political narratives, right? So like, where you can still be elected, where the public will accept it. And then whoever has the largest Overton window will usually win the election. And so like in 2020, there was, defund the police became a big thing. And while there was a huge amount of support for George Floyd and for police reform, defund the police became this kind of hashtag and this kind of language that maybe pushed too far to the left and maybe lost some voters on the right. And I'm not saying, I don't want to get into whether or not we should defund the police. To me, that whole thing is complex and nuanced. Yeah, my point is just there is an Overton window, whether you're going to the left or to the right. Now, and I certainly, and if you've listened to me on my show at all or follow me on Twitter or Blue Sky, you know how I feel about transgender people and the marginalization and virtual criminalization of them and just how nasty and unwarranted that is. But, the right managed to use that to alienate the entire left by even suggesting that, we're okay with men beating up women. And I'm not saying that's the way it happened. I'm saying that's the caricature that they presented the left as. And you have many on the left now who won't protect transgender people because of that caricature. What we need to do is we need to take the Overton window back. We need to move. They keep doing this. They keep moving it to the right. They keep moving it to the right, further and further and further. And they'll do things and they'll deport 300 people. And then once you get used to that, it'll be 3,000 people. And then it'll be 30,000 people. And then it'll be 30 million people. Then it'll be, first they came for the communists, then they came for the socialists. Do we not know our own history? Our own world history, our own national history? We allowed 100,000 Japanese citizens to be locked up by using the same laws that Trump is using right now. So if you ever thought, that, boy, how did, and hey, it was Democrats that did that, and I will absolutely criticize them for it. That to me is one of the most horrific things from that time period. There's some other stuff too, but I don't want to go into all that because it's too much of a digression. That's actually something I could talk about later. I think there's a lot there. But the right wing is so focused on just fascism, and then if you call it fascism, they get all upset. But they keep moving it to the right. How much further to the right can we go? It's like they get mad when you call them Nazis, and I just, where's the difference? Once you start, arguing that the president is above the law, that nobody else has due process, that you start just selling the country to the oligarchs and the corporations. Like that, fascism is really, some people, like I think Mussolini called it corporatism. It's an oligarchical ideology. Where is the difference? And if you're going to say the difference is not gassing 6 million Jews, then A, they didn't start gassing 6 million Jews, and B, that is a really, really low friggin' bar. That is a bar we should not be discussing. We should not. I could not believe yesterday, as I was like, on Twitter and Blue Sky and social media, and people were sitting there arguing like against the idea of due process. And I'd be like, well, how about you? What if it was you? And they're like, but I'm a citizen. Not if I say you're not. Like, you have to prove you're a citizen. And there's a place to do that for everybody that is removed. There's a place, and it's called an immigration court. And so if I were to haul you in there and, say I'm going to deport you, you'd say I'm a citizen. And then I'd be like, no, you're not. And then you could say, look, I was born in Louisiana, and show your birth certificate. And I'd say, okay, guess you're a citizen. Like, there's a way to prove that. But when you're not allowed a way to prove that you're here legally, then you can deport anybody that's here legally. Don't use your status as a citizen or a legal immigrant or a naturalized citizen or your green card. We had people locked up with green cards. We had people with like literal orders, don't remove me, that they removed. Do not think that your legal status matters, because it obviously doesn't. And that's why we need rule of law for all 300 of those people. And you know what? If all 300 of them are criminals, then bring them back, indict them, try them, and convict them, and then put them in prison in America. That's fine. I'm cool with that. I have absolutely no problem with violent criminals being sent to prison. I do have a problem with innocent people being sent to prison. And for the entirety of Western history, have had the notion that the way you do that is you try people. You have a justice system. You have a judicial system. There is a process you go through. And that process is due to every human being in America. And that's why we call it due process, because it is the process which you as a human are due. You get that, J.D. Vance? I know that you were taught at liberal Yale to get your law degree, and I would have thought they would have covered that, but maybe you forgot. Maybe you forgot that. And it says person. That's the other thing that I wanted to bring up is like, it says person in the Constitution. And one of the things the Nazis love to do is they love to dehumanize people. And it's one of the things Trump does. He calls them animals. The stupid whore was calling them, got very, very offended that people were calling him a Maryland man. He was living in Maryland and he's a man, right? Dehumanizing. She got mad, even madder, that people would call him a Maryland father. And he has children. And he's living in Maryland. She wants to call him a terrorist, convict him of terrorism. She wants to call him a human trafficker, convict him of human trafficker. She wants to convict him of murder, or call him a murderer, convict him of murder. But what makes our society what our society is, it's due process of law. These are the same people that when January 6th defendants had their due process, they were indicted, they had their day in court, and they were convicted. Then all we hear about is due process, and as though that's not what's happening. The process was happening with them. They got their due process. They just happened to be guilty. Donald Trump got due process and then some. I'm old enough to remember, at least when we were taught, not sure if it was ever true, but at least we were taught that the great thing about America is whether you're the lowest person or the president of the United States, the law applies to you the same. But now we have a president that's above the law, and we have immigrants who are beneath the law. That's not America. That is not what our founding fathers had in mind. Well, in some ways they were, but anyway, it's not the ideal that we have strived for through our entire 250 years as a nation. It's not what we have reached for. And I don't think we've ever gotten there. But we sure as hell aren't getting closer right now. It is, I can't even grasp it sometimes. And so anyway, I spent a lot of time on this. I'm going to do I'm going to try and do a one of those explainer videos, one of the whiteboard videos on the details of this, where I'll show some of the court documents and stuff. There's some things that, like, they keep, I do need to address one. They've misrepresented some things, such as you see this screenshot of the judge saying that he was a terrorist. That's not what that is. That was the judge was going on the word of the police officer that was fired, right? So based on and an immigration hearing and everything, again, is just, it's a much lower standard, and one of the big differences, you don't have to prove what, like, the cop doesn't have to prove what he's saying is true. Abrego Garcia had to prove what he was saying was not true. And, I guess if you're in jail, it's hard to defend that you're not a gangster. And none of the people that he was detained with were ever held, were ever charged. There was no, this murder investigation never happened, or at least they can't present what murder investigation he was connected with. They can't tell you who the informant is. So all of these things are, were admittable in the immigration court. They're not admittable in a criminal court. And when you're putting somebody in prison, it's a different thing than if you're just sending them back to their country. Immigration courts only handle with deportation. So there's a different level of criteria. And so the charges against him, like even the evidence against him, as thin as it is, would be completely inadmissible in an actual criminal court. Can you imagine if you were in a criminal court and you were going to face life in prison, and the evidence against you was you had on a hat and a hoodie, and this one guy talked to this other guy, and he's a liar. We know he's a liar, but he said this one thing, and the one guy said, because you belong to this gang. Oh, and then the informant told him he was in this what was it? The branch of MS-13 that didn't even function in the area in Maryland. It was like in New York. It was like a Waze or something. I should have written notes for this. Anyway, the MS-13 guy or the guy that was saying he was an MS-13 gang member said he was a part of a particular section of MS-13 that didn't even operate in Maryland. It operated in New York, and Garcia and Abrego Garcia had never even been to New York, at least, you know, that they could show. And that's kind of the important thing with criminal trials, is it's not what you can say, it's what you can show. And they can't show any evidence. There is, like, I mean, you just think about it. There is not one piece of evidence. There is not one piece of evidence that they have against him that is even admissible in a criminal trial. He has never been in a criminal court. He has never been accused of an actual felony. Like, you can say he was committed, you know, like the crime, he crossed illegally, but that's already been taken care of by the judge's decision of no removal. And let's face it, like, fleeing to a different country to save your life is not like a moral crime. If your house was on fire and you were under house arrest, would you leave your house? Would you break the law to avoid dying? Would you say that somebody that died wearing an ankle, or that left their house wearing an ankle bracelet because the house was on fire, should they like be sent off to die in a foreign country? Like, this is the kind of logic they have. And so, yeah, he entered the country illegally. It's a misdemeanor. It's not even a felony. But he deserves to die in prison because they're accusing him of being one of the people he was fleeing. That's like sending Albert Einstein back to Germany because he's German, you know, during World War II. Like, sending the Jews, and I should probably mention this, the whole reason we have asylum laws is we were sending Jews back to Germany during World War II because they were German. So, yeah, we were accusing them of being the threat that they were running, and then we sent them back there, and then they were murdered by the people they were running from. How is that different? This is what I mean. When you start breaking it down, there is not a lot of difference between MAGAs and Nazis. The only difference is the red hat. And it's going to get worse. And on top of that, this is something else. I'm over. Should I keep going, or let me see something here? Wow. I think I'll stop there and use my energy to work on the whiteboard. But anyway, thank you for joining and participating. I hope you're upset as me. You know, feel free to say something in the comments or at me on Twitter or Blue Sky. I'm at Machine Fun Kelly on both. But I just, please, I don't retreat into our bubble. Pop theirs. We need to fight back on this. We do not need to just retreat or hide from these things. We don't need, like, this is not the time to be frustrated. This is not the time to just say, I can't deal with it anymore. If you have a MAGA in your life, fight them on this. Fight them on this. Fight for Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Fight for his family. Fight for the 300 who are being wrongfully renditioned. Fight for all the people that will be. And fight for yourself. Because you don't know. You don't know when the MAGA government, I don't even want to say American government. When is the MAGA government going to come for you? When is the tiger going to eat your face? And what will you do about it? Like, that's what you need to ask them. We cannot live like this. We can't live in retreat. We can't live in fear. We can't live in horror. If all of that shit's going to be going on, we've got to be fighting. So fight back. Please fight back. Fight back like those Germans who were tearing down the wall in Berlin. All right. I've been emotional this week. All right. Appreciate you guys. I will talk to you later.